Okay, I'm back from the final part of the series. So, talk about finishing products and how I finish my body panels. And you see here, this is a typical part, which has got quite a nice shine, quite a nice finish to it. And so I get lots of questions about how do I do that. So once you've got your clear coat settled and you know everything's done, you generally leave the clear coat to settle for at least a week, maybe even longer, depending on the kind of paint you're using. And then we'll generally let it sit a little bit longer. Lacquers can tend to dry a little bit quicker, but usually the way I do is a little nail test in the corner. Just find a little part of the body and just push your fingernail in. Okay, and if you see dents, no, it's still too soft. So just walk away and leave it. If once it's ready, I usually start polishing with various products. So my biggest go-to at the moment is micromesh. Now these are some very worn out micromesh paper. So these come in cloth actually, and they start at 3200 grit, so quite fine, all the way up to 12,000 grit, which is almost like paper really. Yeah, and so these are very worn, but these are great for removing things like orange peel, for things like even dust marks. If you get a big piece of dust that drops into your body after you painted it, don't have to stress, because quite often these will just remove it. If you give it a good rub, start at 3,000 grit or 4,000 grit and work your way up, and you'll find quite often it'll just disappear as you start rubbing it out, depending on how thick your clear coat is as well. And if you've got some parts which are a lot of wings in Formula 1 cars and that stuff, you know, have little nooks and crannies and all the aero bits and pieces, these polishing sticks here are very good. Same product, same micro mesh product, but they'll put them on little sticks, and so you can actually cut them to fit, just with scissors, and to fit little areas and that kind of stuff. And these are quite good. So these are from Scale Motorsport, big fan of their products. And they come in a little fold-up pack, like a little set of matches, and you get about 20 or 30 of these, so they last a very long time. And they're great for just getting into little nooks and crannies. Now, something which I found also is these polishing pads. Now, I work with a lot of metals. These are fantastic. These are also micro mesh, same coarseness level, but you get these from wood turners, believe it or not. So you can go to places like you know, people who do all that wood turning into those amazing pots and those kind of vases and that kind of stuff, and they do those really highly polished looking vases after they've varnished them and that. They sell these. They're quite cheap. They're about $50 for a whole set, and they range at the same sort of grit. These are really good just for if you just want to just take seams off something. So they even go down to a lower grit team to 1500 grit, right up to 12,000. So yeah, I've used these a lot, specifically on metal parts. It's great for just giving that real nice finish on metal parts as well, without having to paint them. Once you've got all that done, then you can start working on various rubbing compounds as well. So obviously Tamiya is one of the major rubbing compound vendors. So start with a coarse grit. If you don't want to use micro mesh, you don't have to. By the way, you can do micro mesh on either wet sand or dry sand. And wet sand, just drop in a bit of detergent and give it a wipe, and just give it a sand and that stuff as well. Generally with rubbing compound, you can use that as well. This particular Lotus, I didn't actually use too much micro mesh because the clear actually settled quite nicely. So I just used the rubbing compound. That's the coarse compound from Tamiya, very good. Then I slowly worked my way up to, what was that one? There's the fine one, which is basically that, plus just with a little bit finer, then to finish, okay? None of these are waxes as far as I know. And the big difference between waxes and rubbing compound, wax, if it dries and it goes all sort of powdery, you know it's a wax. If it's a rubbing compound, if it dries, you should be able to just wipe it off. That's the big difference. And then once I've finished, I use this stuff. I don't know if you guys can read that, but this model is wax. Very, very good. It's worth its weight in gold. It's only about $20 a bottle. Lasts a very long time. And what you do after you've given it a good rub down with a rubbing compound or micro mesh, either or. I've even gone from, if you check that Ferrari 312T I did, I went straight from 6,000 grit micro mesh, doing the whole car on that, straight into this. And you wouldn't even know. It looks mirror finish. This stuff is so good, okay? And that is a true wax. And so what it does, it gives it a beautiful layer, smooths everything out, and it's actually got a little bit of a cutter in it as well, so you got to be careful with that. You don't cut through the paint into the primer again too, and you get that kind of finish on it, because this was done with that wax as well. Actually, I do all my cars with that wax. So yeah, so that's the main thing. The only thing you got to watch out for with any of these rubbing compounds is all the edges. So if you talk to anyone who does a lot of finishing and that stuff, you got to watch the edges here, because if you start polishing like this, the edges will start getting worn away very quickly, and you might get a bit of the primer coming through. So to deal with that, you just got to be very careful when you're rubbing. So I just, first of all, I start more in the middle and start working my way out, rather than going across the whole car at the same time. I just keep one eye on the corner bits, which usually go about, if you're careful, you start rubbing through to the clear coat, then through to the paint, and then you're gonna have to go, oh, I've got to touch that up again. So that's the only thing you just got to be careful of in doing that. And then once you've got that, you should have a beautiful finish, and you're ready to rock. So any questions, fire through to me. I'm more than happy to have a chat with you guys about it on the chats, and check out some of my builds on the photo library, because that's got a lot of the applications. Also the build diaries I have on them of all my latest builds actually talks about the sequences I use for various cars, because sometimes I go to micro mesh versus this, and sometimes I just go straight to the rubbing compound, depending on the finish I get as well. And so that's good. Now, before I close, is I work on the principle also of the finish should match the period of the car. So because I do a lot of motorsport cars, the cars from the the more modern cars, like the 80s, 90s, 2000s and plus, usually have quite a high gloss finish like this here. But if you're going for like the 70s, 60s, 50s cars, quite often those cars either look banged up. Even like if you check the Tyrrell P34 six-wheeler, and you compare it to a real day Tyrrell 34 P6-wheeler, P34 six-wheeler that raced, they don't have those mirror finishes. Irrespective of what people say, they were quite banged up, because they just didn't have that quality of finish in those days. They were quite they weren't satin, they were more of just a straight gloss finish, and it wasn't a high gloss finish, right? The cars from the 50s and 60s, or even if you're going earlier to the pre and post war cars, they were quite often a semi-gloss or a satin finish. So you just make sure that you don't get carried away with getting that super gloss finish when it doesn't match the period of the car as well. So I'm going to be working on hopefully in the near future some very old pre-war cars, so like 1906 Fiat Grand Prix car and that stuff, which those cars were almost matte in their finish, not quite, but more of a satin matte finish. So you just don't really want that high gloss finish you can see in the modern cars today. So keep that in mind when you're rubbing rubbing them out and getting all that finish done as well. Make sure it's appropriate for the period of the car. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful, and fire any questions away if you have anything. Talk soon.